With the 20th pick in the 2014 NBA Draft, the Toronto Raptors select Bruno Caboclo from São Paulo, Brazil. He last played for Pinheiros in Brazil.
What just happened?
A few moments later.
This is the all-time swing for the fences pick. He's described as the Brazilian Kevin Durant. He's 6'9". He's a terrific athlete, but he's so raw. He's 2 years away from being 2 years away, and then we'll see.
Bruno Caboclo. This dude is, to put it frankly, a freak. Hailing from a small town near Sao Paulo, Brazil, Bruno would grow from being 5'10" at 13 years old to being 6'9" by the time he was 17. Now, of course, that's not that crazy, as being 5'10" is tall for a 13-year-old, and most NBA players go through some sort of crazy growth spurt that's necessary for them to become NBA draft prospects. But yet, why was Bruno, a guy who didn't know a single word of English and hadn't played for a competitive team before he was 17, so highly coveted to where he became a first-round draft pick in the best basketball league in the world? To answer a question like this, we're gonna need some context. The average wingspan of a male is roughly 2.1 inches longer than their actual height. Now, naturally, NBA players are gonna have more impressive measurements. In 2014, the average draft prospect had a wingspan 4.8 inches longer than their height, more than double that of the average man. This, of course, allows for a significant advantage in the basketball realm, especially when considering their ridiculous heights, as they're able to better shoot over opponents and block shots. But beyond even the freaks known as NBA players is Mr. Caboclo, whose wingspan is a whole 9.5 inches longer than his height. Another doubling of the wingspan of those in his class, and more than 4 times than that of the average man. As you can see, this Caboclo guy isn't just any normal dude, but he was hardly recruited and completely under the radar due to living and playing internationally. Sorta rings a bell, doesn't it? The Bucks have been interested in a certain Greek player just a year earlier, and had swung for the fences at a guy that they only seen 30 weeks beforehand, with the hopes of developing him into a quality player down the road. I mean, it worked. Masai Ujiri, the president and GM of the Toronto Raptors, was recently on a podcast where he was asked about his thoughts on the super teams in the NBA.
Honestly, I think it will change again, it's just a matter of time, we're a trendy league, and we're copycat, we just go with the waves.
Okay, now why on earth would you need to know this guy's thoughts on the state of the league? That's a good question. Remember this?
The Brazilian Kevin Durant, 6'9", a terrific athlete.
As the GM of the organization itself said, it's a trendy league, whether it be for the good or for the bad. Now with 3 years of hindsight at our disposal, we can see that the 2014 draft class was one of the more uninspiring classes in recent years. I mean, arguably the 2 best players in the draft, Jabari Parker and Joel Embiid, are terribly injury prone. Dante Exum was actually a top 5 pick, and the second rounder Nikola Jokic is leaps and bounds ahead of everyone except for like 3 players in the entire draft. So now enter the Toronto Raptors. Coming into the draft, they possess 2 picks, their own first round pick at number 20 and a second round pick at number 37. Their original goal was to trade up using their 2 picks and try to get the 16th pick in order to grab James Young. But then that fell through, so they went to plan B to try and get themselves a native Canadian in Tyler Ennis. But then he was chosen 2 picks ahead. So at this point, the Raptors are at a loss. Everyone they really wanted at this point was gone, and they didn't have much interest in any of the other players, except Bruno. Hold up now. Before we go on, let's take it back about a year. At around this time, Bruno had entered the United States for the very first time in his life. You see, back in Brazil, Bruno had started playing casually with his friends at around 13 and played for a local club, but that's about it. Even so, Caboclo's name was able to make it to the US, reaching the ears of Rafael Franco, the founder of a prep school in North Carolina. Strings were pulled, money was offered, and before he knew it, Bruno was traveling the country playing against American competition and attracting American attention. 18 D1 schools were interested in Bruno's services. With full intentions of making the NBA, Bruno decided to sign with a Brazilian pro club called Pinheiros Sky. At this point, NBA teams were intrigued, especially Toronto. After winning the MVP of the South American Basketball Without Borders game, Masai Ujiri sent a scout to go see what Bruno was made of. He was deemed worthy of a second-round pick, and he would have been too if it weren't for his 7'6.5" wingspan, combined with a work ethic that both Masai and coach Dwayne Casey were impressed by. While he was still raw, he was able to shoot the ball really well, put the ball on the floor, and they saw that he had outstanding defensive potential. Everyone in the Toronto front office agreed that Bruno could be something special. Alright, now that we all caught up, let's get back to the action. The Raptors knew that they were going to get Bruno one way or another. The question was when. The 37th pick had seemed like a safe bet before, but other teams had caught on to what was happening and wanted to draft him in the late first round. With 5 minutes left to make a decision, the front office had two choices. Draft a more established player and hope that Bruno was still there by the time their second round pick came along, or pull the trigger and draft Bruno. They decided it was too risky to pass up Bruno. And with nobody else left on the draft board that they thought could help them, the Raptors decided to pull the trigger on the 18-year-old who could either become the next Kevin Durant or the next Derek Williams. Alright, now fast forward about 5 months to November 21st. The Raptors were hosting the Bucks that day, and at the start of the fourth quarter they were winning 101-57. Since they're winning by 50 and the crowd is really wanting it, Dwayne Casey decides to put in Bruno Caboclo in his first NBA game. What proceeded to happen next was nothing short of amazing. To kick it off, Bruno catches a lob for his first NBA bucket. Then he goes ahead and drills a three-pointer. And then another one. And for the finisher, he ends his first ever NBA experience by doing this.
He's one of the best in the NBA, and that Bruno with the denial!
After that game, NBA fans, especially the Canadian ones, were shown the potential of Bruno, and they were captivated. Unfortunately, for the rest of his rookie season, he only played 7 more games and scored 2 more points. For good reason though, as they were mainly focusing on developing him, much like Giannis and Thon Maker with the Bucks. So the next season was much of the same, but this time he was actually able to put in minutes as the Toronto Raptors got a D-League affiliate in the Raptors 905. He played 30 minutes a game, but he wasn't doing too hot. He only averaged 15 points a game on 40% shooting. That's Monte Ellis bad! But that's sorta what you're gonna have to deal with when someone hasn't faced college or even European competition. So his second year ends and nothing eventful happens, which was fine and all, but the clock was ticking. The third season rolls along and it's scarily starting to look like he's not improving, but actually regressing on the offensive end. Throughout the entire regular season in the D-League, Bruno doesn't even average 10 points on 27 minutes, and it starts to look like the Raptors maybe made a mistake. Then, out of nowhere, Bruno drops 31 to close out the series in the D-League Finals, showing flashes of his incredible upside that Toronto drafted him for. Since that though, he's not been looking that great. In the summer, he got kicked off the Brazilian national team for throwing a temper tantrum, which led him to only playing 7 minutes with the Raptors before he sent himself down to the G League again. While granted, he's averaging better numbers there than he ever has, he still doesn't look NBA ready. With the 905, they're playing him at center, something he could never hope to do if and or when he's moved back up to the Raptors. Add that onto the fact that his numbers are coming from playing almost 34 minutes a game in the G League, makes it seem that Bruno Caboclo may just be a failed freak. Or, on the other hand, he could blossom into the next Giannis Antetokounmpo or Kevin Durant. He has the physical tools, and you can see flashes of his enormous potential at times. And he's only 22 years in just his 6th year of actually playing basketball competitively. Dwayne Casey even said that Bruno is one of the best shooters on the team, which is honestly pretty amazing considering his experience level. Even with the leverage that he has, Bruno hasn't broken out. Yet. And I got a pretty good theory on why he hasn't. In sport, there are 2 sides to performance: physical and mental. If you're an athlete, you know this. It's been pretty well documented that Bruno's not the toughest player in the mental department. It makes sense seeing as he skipped college to play a sport professionally that he had only played for a year really, and was expected to be great at, despite a blatant lack of initial experience. In other words, he started making millions of dollars for a game he didn't even know how to play really. You see that's a lot of pressure, especially for a teenager in a new country with a new language. So I really can't blame him. But if he can get over that, it would be interesting. So, is Bruno Caboclo a failed freak? or the next Giannis. Either could happen, even though it's not likely that he'll start averaging 30 points a game. However, he has the physical tools and the skill set that could turn him into a star, if not a superstar someday. But in my honest opinion, I think he'll be a mix in between. Maybe like a Trevor Ariza, like a solid starter. Next year his contract with Toronto expires, and he might find a new home somewhere else and contribute well. Or maybe he'll be out of the league. Or heck, maybe he'll lead the Raptors to the finals next year. With a guy like Bruno Caboclo, it's honestly hard to tell. Masai Ujiri, the president and GM of the Toronto Raptors, yeah. We finna go faster, yeah. I'm feeling like Sonic, yeah. Sonic the Blaster, yeah. Anyway, let me stop. Masai Ujiri, the president and GM of the Toronto Raptors, was eating that. I am feeling in that. Come on now. Skirt, okay.